Good evening, everyone, and thanks once again for joining us for Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy, and I'll be hosting today's show. On the fire danger chart, still a wide swath here of high fire danger across the central interior, narrowing out or becoming a little thinner back across the Kobuk Valley, Selawik Valley on out toward Kotzebue Sound there and in toward the greater Kilbrook area. Also, Susitna Valley, Matanuska Valley, high fire danger also down the Kenai Peninsula. Of course, with temperatures rising into the 80s today and warm weather yesterday. And then here in the Copper River Basin, extreme still up there around the Yukon Porcupine River areas, as well as a fair portion of the Yukon Flats. And for satellite imagery, we do have clouds spreading southward across that area, breaking up as they head down across the White Mountains in the upper Tanana Valley and to the Alaska Range there. You can see some breaks in the clouds. And also down here over the southern southeast coast, a disturbance bringing clouds and showers today, which are dissipating this afternoon as that system slips on off to the southeast. Otherwise, pretty good conditions here over all of the interior. And the next system out over the Bering Sea, pushing eastward in the front back in around this position here. That brought up to nearly an inch of rain falling today in a 12-hour period at 3 p.m. this afternoon at Adak with 40 to 50 mile an hour wind gusts, and of course the heavy precipitation there associated with the remnants of a tropical system. And so pretty well moisture loaded as well as pretty warm air mass, especially aloft with that. Rain spreading in across the eastern Aleutians and eventually into the Alaska Peninsula. Rain starting up over the Pribilof Islands today with St. George peaking about 0.04 of an inch of rain or 0.05 of an inch of rain. More to come though as that moisture continues to spread northward. This will push up toward the southwest coast and begin to slow down here as it bumps up against that strong area high pressure loft here over the interior. Otherwise, a little bit of moisture back over the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Kaktovik also picked about 4 or 5/100 of an inch of rainfall during the day today. Otherwise, this just really mid and high level clouds streaming southward there, a little lower on the north side of the Berks Range in the eastern North Slope, but generally just clouds with little, if any, precipitation associated with it. Isolated thunderstorms are developing here over the eastern Alaska Range and trying to build over around the Talkeetnas. Otherwise, sunny skies, temperatures 70s to lower to mid 80s in some cases. Susitna Valley, very warm today, as well as the Matanuska Valley and the Kenai Peninsula. Big Lake, warm spot in the state this afternoon, 86 degrees Fahrenheit recorded there. Sunshine in the Copper River Basin. And then as much as 0.3 of an inch of rain falling today with these showers down around the net, up to a 1/2 inch, Shelter Cove. But again, that's all diminishing in the afternoon today as that ship slips off to the southeast and the front out here pushing eastward across the Aleutians. Pretty good west-southwest flow pushing that right along here, but again, winds aloft splitting right in this area, so this will begin to shear off to the southeast and then push more to the north. So its eastward progression will really slow as it approaches the coast later tonight. As you'll see, actually it weakens, so the stronger winds they experience out here over the central Aleutians won't be experienced over the Alaska Peninsula. Pretty slight gradient, could get a little breezy around Cold Bay there with that southeast wind, maybe 25, possibly gust 30, otherwise it'll be lighter elsewhere. Periods of rain with this fog, IFR of course, and numerous showers and pretty gusty westerly winds here across the Aleutians. Otherwise high pressure centered over Norton Sound, Seward Peninsula. Of course, dry conditions, low clouds and fog, northern Bering Sea right up into the Chukchi. And this front bringing a chance of rain down toward the central Arctic coast later tonight. Low clouds and fog pretty extensive here over the Gulf of Alaska, and probably some areas of drizzle, if not maybe even light rain associated with it, but that should stay mostly along and off the coast. Again, pressing up to the panhandle, showers ending over the southern panhandle, and isolated showers possible this evening over the northern areas. And then for tomorrow, looks like a little bit better chance of some shower activity in areas, especially over toward the border in the afternoon. Otherwise, may see some partly sunny skies down there with light winds. This front, again, trying to push into the area high pressure, but again, it's splitting and part of the wind flow carrying moisture off to the southeast. This trying to push up to the north. Main low center hanging back to the west. So another warm, dry day over much interior Alaska from the Brooks Range southward. Prince William Sound, even Kodiak Island should see some sun. Isolated thunderstorms possible here again over the Talkeetnas and Wrangell Mountains, maybe the eastern Brooks Range, eastern Alaska Range. None up there over the eastern Brooks Range, but pretty good chance of light rain, fog, and drizzle will occur with this front, along with some gusty winds. Even today, Barrow seeing gusts 30 to 35 miles an hour out of the west. It'll stay windy tomorrow, especially behind this front or as it drops down. And looks like a trough swinging in to the western Aleutians. Keep the strongest winds mostly to the north there of the Aleutian chain. And then for Sunday, that low tracks northeastward. Another one develops and drives up into the southeast, or right around Kotzebue, actually. This one moves to near Nunivak Island. The front progresses eastward, finally gets pushed through the entire pattern, shifting eastward. So the upper level ridge retreating off to the east, and southwest flow drives that front eastward. Gusty southeast winds, maybe 40 to 50 miles an hour here across the higher elevations, south central Alaska, with areas of rain mainly in the upslope areas. Also Copper River Basin along Copper River, pretty gusty winds there. Could see gusts 35 miles an hour. And fair over the panhandle with light winds and chance of rain across the Brooks Range into the northwest coast. Another area of pretty extensive precipitation out here, light precipitation over the southwest interior. And for the lows tonight, very mild, 61 there at Fort Yukon, 50s all the way down to the coastline here, and southward to Kodiak Island, 40s in the Aleutians. Highs for tomorrow, 60s for the Panhandle, maybe near, well, 60s, mid-60s, and back into the 80s here, mid-80s, lower to mid-80s over the eastern interior, and 70s down toward the Bethel area, 70s, lower 80s against the Sitna-Matanuska Valley, maybe the Kenai Peninsula. And then the lows for Sunday morning, again, mild up here over the northeast, lower 30s on the Arctic coast, and upper 40s here as you get out toward the Bering Sea coastline, mid 40s Pribilofs, 50s for the Panhandle, and highs for Sunday cooling off a fair amount here, about 10 degrees or so up over the northeast interior, but still well into the 70s, definitely cooler with all that moisture sliding into south central Alaska.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Not much change out in the Bering Sea tomorrow morning. IFR dominating the entire zone there from the Aleutians on up, not quite to the southwest coast, and then that extends through the Bering Strait, and then up along the northwest coast here. Looks like Kivalina on up to Cape Lisburne, IFR, and then marginal VFR, say for Point Lay, then back into the IFR for the central and eastern Arctic coast. Good VFR in the interior, southeast coast, IFR in over much of the area, extending up to the North Gulf Coast. You can see in the afternoon that becomes marginal VFR, so a little bit of an improvement there for the Panhandle. Otherwise, IFR covering the Gulf of Alaska, not quite reaching the coast, but marginal VFR in across Prince William Sound, and then on down to the Barren Islands, Kodiak Island, especially the east side there, marginal VFR. IFR here, Southern Alaska Peninsula, Western Arctic coast through the Bering Strait, of course Bering Sea. Got IFR right up toward the coastline and covering again much of the Aleutians, although Unalaska Island becoming marginal in the afternoon. And then for Sunday morning, looks like the IFR retreats a little bit here over the eastern Bering Sea, but still marginal VFR. And now that southwest flow busting through the upper level ridge, whole pattern shifting eastward. It's going to allow a lot more moisture to start flowing into the southwest and into southern Alaska here. So we've got IFR working northward along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, socking into Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, even up toward the Wrangell Mountains. IFR, central northern Panhandle, And then for the afternoon, marginal VFR all the way up to the Alaska Range, across just about all the Copper River Basin, Prince William Sound, eastern southern Kenai Peninsula, down to just east of Kodiak Island. That's the IFR zone, right up along the North Gulf Coast into the Coast Range, Northern Panhandle, IFR, marginal down to Dixon Entrance, an area of IFR there over the western and central Brooks Range, possibly down into the northwest Koyukuk Valley, western Arctic Slope, IFR southwest of the Pribilofs, and then pretty widespread all the way out to the Shemya-Attu area on into Nikolsky. Passes tomorrow looking pretty good. Anatuvik and Atigun, both VFR, and same forecast Lake Clark and Merrill. One more day of VFR flying for those passes. Same forecast for Rainy, Windy, VFR, and Isabel VFR. Mentasta, marginal VFR, maybe early, but becoming generally a VFR day. Risk of an isolated thunderstorm. And for Tanita, VFR. And Portage looks good as well, VFR, again for one more day. And Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. Freezing levels pretty high across all of Alaska here, 10,000 or 12,000 feet here up over the Chukchi Sea in the northwest coast, down to Shishmaref, and then right around that 10 to 12,000 foot range here over much of the interior, down into the Gulf, a shade under 10,000 there, maybe 9,000 at the Panhandle. Very warm air aloft associated with that remnants of that tropical system. So we've got 16,000 foot freezing levels coming in over the eastern Aleutians. And Icing with that, not all that serious, band of light to isolated moderate rime icing flowing in, but again with the high freezing levels, that's going to be above 14,000 feet. Could be some considerable moderate worked into there. Also up here over the northern Bering Sea, otherwise icing free over the interior. And then some moisture along the central western Arctic coast gives a chance of icing conditions up there of about 6,000 feet. And for the jet stream, high pressure tomorrow, midday, right over Prince William Sound, more or less here, continues to control much of the southern and central interior areas. A good westerly jet around a strong polar vortex there northwest of Banks Island. So about 100 knots right along, especially the central Arctic coast. This system coming in slowly. A good jet here, you can see splitting right through here. So initially, anything coming into that is going to shear off down to the southeast or hit up northward there along the west coast. But the entire pattern shifting eastward, so this will allow, the split will move eastward, and Sunday that'll allow a lot more moisture into the southern interior. And for 9,000 feet, southeast 15 to 20 knots here, up to 25 in the interior, 50 knot westerlies there on central Arctic coast, 55 to 60 for the Aleutians, 35 to 40 knots here for 3,000 feet along the Aleutians, 20 to maybe 25 southwest coast, west 35 in the Arctic coast, light for the Panhandle and southeast Alaska, and turbulence pretty bumpy for the Aleutians, the southwest coast, and the north slope from the Brooks Range to the Arctic coast.
When you think of a national park, you probably envision wide open natural spaces, undisturbed by human activity. There are indeed such places, but even in some of the most remote areas of a place like Kenai Fjords National Park in Alaska, the mark of man is present. Marine debris is a menace to the farthest reaches of our globe, and even designated national park lands are not immune. In the summer of 2009, the Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance, a grassroots conservation organization based in Seward, Alaska, decided to do something about the marine debris fouling the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park. Marine debris coordinator Tim Johnson had first-hand experience with the issue.
The summer before, my wife and I, Michelle, had done a paddle from Seward, sea kayak paddle from Seward to Homer. Really, our eyes were open to some areas that we didn't realize there was so much accumulation. It was very deceiving up front. You couldn't really get a feel for the extent and impact of it. You've got this nice high tide line that's quite pristine, and you really don't get a picture for the impact, the amount of debris in that area until you get behind those storm berms. You get back into the lagoons and the vegetation around those lagoons. And then you see the absolute extent back into that veg and how intertwined and enmeshed these decades of trash deposition. So we were just appalled by that and said we got to get something together on a larger scale.
The Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance is a local nonprofit community organization, and they have been instrumental in helping the Park Service obtain funding to get larger boats to help move the debris, and they get volunteer labor and organize the work trips. And so it's really a partnership between the Park Service and the community to help get out and really get a project done that in and of itself any one group couldn't do on their own.
Most of that trash was baggable. However, there were large items, huge, piles of hauser line, for example, that we just had to hoist up onto the boat.
The volunteers didn't just bag, haul, and hoist the garbage, but also carefully recorded what types of debris were collected.
In many ways, the debris itself is a resource. Archaeologists use middens, the trash heaps, as a way of analyzing past cultures, and in one sense marine debris is a form of a midden. It's a trash heap that left for the future would be something that people could use to analyze our culture. It may not say the best things about our culture or everything that we want, but we need to be able to document what we've done so that we can preserve that legacy, make sure that we as a society don't forget what we've been doing.
We had two larger categories of marine debris that we picked up. Commercial fishing means like, say, gill nets, large hauser lines, anything that would be associated with more of a commercial fishing scale. And then the second category was more recreational fishing and household, which would be general plastics, things like that. So we had about a 75% of the commercial fishing marine debris element, and about 25% of the recreational and household further out the bay. And we had the exact opposite the closer we got to Seward. Within the bay, it was about 25% commercial fishing versus 75% recreational fishing and household.
The trash is not just unsightly for park visitors, but also poses threats to wildlife and marine habitat.
Really one of the larger issues now that you go to this plastic that can really get into the food web and affect the food web differently than something like glass.
These substances, for instance, all these polystyrene blocks that are breaking down into all these little crumbly bits are further breaking down on a microscopic level, and how much of an impact that has, in this ecosystem is yet to be determined, but I think it's got pretty high potential.
Well known that sea turtles will eat plastic bags floating in the water. They look like jellyfish to a sea turtle, and Obviously, a plastic bag doesn't go well in the digestive system of a turtle. Albatross will see small pieces of plastic floating on the surface and think they're small fish and other food sources and eat that in their stomachs, especially in some of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. They'll find dead albatross that have starved to death with a full stomach, and it's full of pieces of plastic.
We're affecting our local areas this way, but we need to be thinking about it from more of a state and global, international scale. And most importantly, to try and focus on prevention of it coming in the first place. Because we're just going to see this continuing, to build up on our beaches unless we're able to get a little bit more of an approach on prevention on the front end.
Marine debris is really a global problem, in all the oceans, and there are many different sources. Global shipping is one. Fishing debris from commercial fishing, recreational boating activity on land, stuff blowing off land, washing down streams, people just throwing stuff on the shore.
Though the problem can seem overwhelming, Johnson remains upbeat about making a positive difference.
No, you gotta start locally. You gotta take control of what you can do, and make something with that, and try and move on from there.
Overall, more than 9 tons of debris was removed from the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park and transported back to Seward to be deposited in a landfill.
People gave a lot to the project in order to make it happen. That was awesome. One of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. Being able to put that large of a group of volunteers together, dedicated volunteers to put that much effort and give that much time and pull all the different agencies together to see it all happen was incredible. It was incredible. Yeah, very fulfilling experience.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis. Not much change here through the Chukchi Sea, and maybe a little bit farther back to the north than it has been, but still starting to slowly thaw out a little bit here along the central and to a lesser extent eastern Beaufort Sea coast, while the area back through here kind of expanding northwestward there. Otherwise, not a lot of change, except a continued slow thaw of the sea ice here over the next 5 to 6 days. And for the coastal water forecast, pretty light northwest breeze here, 5 knots, 4-foot seas, south coast, west-northwest at 10. For the north coast, Lynn Canal, south 20, seas 4 feet. Otherwise, south winds at 10 for Stevens Passage, southeast for Clarence Strait. Outlook for Sundays, still southeast Clarence Strait there at 10 knots. No change for Stevens Passage. Lynn Canal, a little stronger, south 25 knots, small craft advisories there. Southeast at 10 on the south coast. North coast, south to southeast 15. A little bit of an increase, but nothing too bad with seas at 5 feet. And Prince William Sound tomorrow, east at 10, 2-foot seas. South 10 here for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Back to the west, winds become easterly, 15 knots, pick up to 20 knots across the Barrens. And a pretty stiff southeast wind into Kamishak Bay at 30 knots, seas up to 8 feet, southwest 20, southern Cook Inlet, north of the Forelands, south at 15 with 4-foot seas. That holds northern Cook Inlet through Sunday, but big increase in the winds coming up for the areas south of the Forelands, 30-knot winds, and minimum gales now for Kamishak Bay, southeast 35 knots, seas 10 feet, and small craft advisories here for the North Gulf Coast at 25 knots. Same thing for Prince William Sound, southeast 25, 4-foot seas, and 30 knots for the Barren Islands. And for Shelikof Strait, northeast at 20 with 4-foot seas, south 15 there for the east side of Kodiak Island. And the Alaska Peninsula, west-southwest, 20 to 25. Small craft advisories will occur on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, southeast 20 for Bristol Bay. And for the Sunday outlook, gales, southwest 35 knots here for the Alaska Peninsula, seas 14 to 15 feet. South 25 there in Bristol Bay with seas up to 8 feet and 30-knot winds from Castle Cape to Sitkinak out of the southwest. Small current advisories, South 25 for Kodiak Island. And for the Fox Islands, west-southwest 25 to 30 knots with seas as high as 14 feet. Central Aleutians, gales there on the Aleutian side of the islands, 35 knots, southwesterlies, and westerlies 30 to 35 with 12 to 13 foot seas for the western zones. And then for Sunday, west winds 30 knots there from Shimia over to and across Adak, still looking at the gales here north of the islands, up to 40 knots here as you get over toward the Fox Islands. In fact, gales all for this zone, 35 to 40 knots out of the west-southwest with seas getting up to 18 feet. And for the southwest coast, southeast 25 with seas running 4 to 5 feet here, east 25 with 4-foot seas for St. Lawrence Island. And for the Pribilof Islands, southwest 25 knots, so small craft advisories everywhere here in these zones, except Norton Sound just east at 15. And then for Sunday, those will pick up and you'll see small craft advisories there. South 25 knots, seas 5 feet, but 40 knot full gales here in the forecast for St. Lawrence Islands out of the north with 12-foot seas, and then southeast 15, north side of Nunivak Island. Small craft advisories on the south side. Pribilof's northwest 25, turn northerly at 30 for St. Matthew Island, seas 12 to 13 feet. Up along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, west 15, northwest 15, central coast, and picking it up to 25 knots here on the west side all the way down to Cape Thompson. Cape Thompson to Wales, southwest 20 with 4 to 5 foot seas. And moving ahead to Sunday, westerlies at 15, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, light northwest breeze on the central coast, north 20, west side, Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, 30-knot winds out of the north, small craft advisories, and then gales from Cape Thompson down to the Bering Strait, north 35, seas 11 feet. For tonight, fair over the interior, light winds, mostly clear skies, low clouds and fog, Gulf of Alaska, southeast coast front, pushing rain to the Alaska Peninsula. Will end late tonight for the Pribilofs. And then for tomorrow, this front brings a chance of rain to the Arctic coast, and rain trying to show up along the southwest coast, having a hard time doing so, but stays wet for the Alaska Peninsula, unsettled over the Aleutians. And the outlook for Sunday, rain pushes in south central Alaska northward along that front. Have a great evening. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.